inspiring you to set the marketplace ablaze in partnership with an awesome and limitless God. This is the Kingdom Driven Entrepreneur Podcast, and this isn't business as usual. Here's your host and Chief Fire Igniter, Shay Bynes.
Welcome back to the Kingdom Driven Entrepreneur Podcast. This is your host, Shay Bynes, and our goal here is to inspire you to operate your business completely yielded and in partnership with our awesome and limitless God. Today's guest is Kim Houston-Bryant, award-winning pastry chef and founder of thebakingmama.com. After years of grinding it out in her own strength, Kim eventually hit a point of exhaustion. Seemingly at the top of her career with celebrity and high-profile corporate clients, she still was unable to operate in the excellence that she knew she was able to provide because it was simply too much. She shared with me that when she read my book, Grace of Her Grind, she wanted to throw it against the wall. But after being fed up with what she was dealing with, she did join our Igniters mentoring family and really experienced a shift. We have such a candid chat today, and her story is a testimony of how God will cause all things to work together for your good and His glory when you align your dreams with His and walk out this adventure called kingdom business with both faith and obedience. But before we get started, I want to encourage you to make sure that you have read 2 books before this year ends. One of them I just mentioned, which is Grace Over Grind, How Grace Will Take Your Business Where Grinding Can't. And the other is my latest, which is The Kingdom Driven Entrepreneur's Guide to Goal Setting, 2nd edition. These are both short and powerful books that, when read together and applied in partnership with the leading of the Holy Spirit, your business will not and cannot be the same. Once you find the freedom of a lifestyle of working diligently by the power of God's grace and favor and in His rest, it positions you for God's absolute best for the work that He's called you to in the marketplace. More kingdom impact in your spheres of influence, and yes, more income too. So you can find both of these books as well as all the other books for Kingdom Driven Entrepreneurs on Amazon.com. But you can also head over to kingdomdrivenentrepreneur.com/books, and then we'll have you all linked up to our books right there. But let's go ahead and get started with today's conversation with Kim Houston-Bryant. Listen in and enjoy. Chef Kim Houston-Bryant, what's up?
Hi.
It's good to have you on the podcast.
Thank you. It is good to be here. I love your podcast.
Why, thank you. Now, we have kind of a funny story because I got to know who you are because you taught my niece years ago how to bake.
Yes. So that that particular actually that class was really fun with them. I love having kids in adult classes because most people don't think that children can do what they can do as an adult. And it's always great when the kids outshine the adults. And she was running circles around the adults in my class. And I was like, oh my God, I love this kid. It's so wonderful.
That's so fun.
Yeah.
And then you wrote a whole blog post and mentioned her. So then my sister told me all about that. She was sharing with the family. Here's the blog post. And I was like, oh, and I saw you were a believer. And so I reached out to you. Just, and that's how we originally connected. But then fast forward, you showed up in my inbox and we've gone back and forth about some business stuff. And then you joined the Igniters mentoring community.
Life-changing. There's no other way to describe what that has done to my life.
That's so awesome. So I want to explore your story. We spent some time kind of catching up prior to hitting record, and there were some things that you said that I think are going to be really valuable for people to hear because there's you had said, this is not a pivot, it is a shift. There's a lot of people who are in a season of shift and walking that thing out with the Lord, allowing Him to lead and guide, getting strategy, insight, and all of those things is so relevant to so many people. So I want to talk about your story. And I think that I want to start with, I've already told people that you are a chef, but first let's give people some context about kind of what you do. And then I have a starting point that I really want to get into with your story.
Okay, no problem. So I am a chef. I went to culinary school 8 years ago. 9 years ago. I finished 8 years ago. I went to Le Cordon Bleu, became a pastry chef, graduated top of my class. Didn't go to graduation because I had 6 orders the same day. So
this
that
graduation because you had work.
I had work to do. So they brought me all of my, I was able to pick up my awards later. But that was a funny story for them to say, shit, a 4.0 and didn't even come to graduation. But that was definitely an incredible experience. Even after I became a pastry chef, I knew I wasn't done education wise. So I got a master's degree in education. Because I've always had this dream of teaching, but I didn't want to just teach anything. So once I started teaching kids how to bake and decorate, I was like, oh, this is wonderful, because it's not just baking and decorating. It's personality development. I get to encourage you in a creative space. It takes the pressure off while they're learning math, because we're doubling recipes or dividing. Yeah. They're building self-confidence, because sometimes things just don't go the way you want them to. So them understanding the weather, like it's going to make an impact on what your cake is going to look like at the end of the day. So being able to just teach kids all these different things that no one ever thinks about in the kitchen, it has been so rewarding. And so
I love that. Yeah. So you were instructing, but you also had a business. You just said, I had orders to do, right? So what were you doing? What was kind of your first business venture with your culinary experience?
So I started, I went to culinary school with a very, very specific purpose. I wanted a cookie shop. I knew that when I went to culinary school. I still have all my paperwork from when I was in school, and that's all over my notebook, is that I was going to be like the next great American cookie company, Mrs. Fields. Like my name was going to be up there in lights. And by the time I ended the program, I learned a couple of things. Number one, I actually love plated desserts. So like the stuff you get in 4-star restaurants and resorts, I love that. And my chef was like, you'll never see your children if you go into this. And I was like, oh, okay. Well, I'm trying to get out of retail right now, so I need to see my kids. And he was like, cake is going to be where you need to go. And I was good at cakes. It's not a passion. I don't think it's ever been a passion, but I picked it up really quickly. I was good at it. The day that my teacher said, look at a puzzle, take it apart, put it together. That's what custom cake is. And I was like, oh, the light bulb went off. That meant nothing that I looked at on Pinterest would ever be able to stop me. It's a puzzle, take it apart, put it back together. So I did cakes for celebrities for years. It was a booming cake business. And then one day I woke up and I was no longer happy. And I was like, no, I want to do cookies. And
I don't like cakes. Let's do cookies.
I don't want to do this anymore. I'm going to do cookies. And I was dropping. I started doing some cookies, and I never know who my clients are. And I did a delivery, and the lady was just like, I want you to meet my husband. And I was like, okay, no big deal, whatever. I don't know who you or your husband are. As I stand in $1 million mansion in Buckhead. And I came to find out he was very high up in the Arthur Blank enterprise.
And
I
what?
Was like, Arthur Blank enterprise, like the Falcons, the State Farm
Arena.
Oh,
yes. Okay.
Like all the things. And I was like, oh, okay. And he was like, can you do these cookies like on corporate levels? And I was like, sure.
Yes, and I'll figure out the rest later.
Yeah, like I committed to it in that moment. And I was like, as soon as I got in my car, I called one of my friends who does websites. I said, we need a cookie website today.
And so that was the beginning of your business.
Yeah, that's when we moved into corporate cookie decorating.
Corporate cookies.
It was that. And that sustained me until COVID.
Wow.
And it was incredible to come out of cake and go into cookies when people were like, you're never going to make any money in cookies. And I was like, when you spend other people's money, you make a lot of money. Corporate dollars are very different. So So that was an interesting season.
Yes.
Because, once it goes out to, it kept going. It was like wildfire. And it got to the point where I was doing hundreds of cookies in order by myself in my very tiny kitchen.
So you never hired employees or anything like that. You were running this business solo.
It was me. The kids would have to wake up at like 6 a.m. and bag cookies if they didn't bag them before they went to bed. So they started bagging them before they went to bed. But I mean, it was just us. And I had gotten to the point that I was like, okay, it's time to move. Like we're ready for a shop. We're ready for employees. This is getting ridiculous. And I remember the last order right before COVID hit was $3,000 worth of cookies that I had to do by myself.
That's a lot of cookies.
There were a lot of tears. And I just remember crying so much because it was so hard and it was so much work. And I was like, there's gotta be a better way. Like, I just can't do this. And so I did the business plan. I did all the things. My business plan was approved to open a store, to go through the process on March 13th of 2020.
Yes.
And on March 14th, my state shut down.
Yes, the COVID quarantine lockdown.
Yeah, that's when lockdown started, the next day. And I was like, hello? Like, what's happening? Like,
you were getting ready to start a store.
Yes.
To make all of these corporate cookie accounts.
Yes.
Deal with all these corporate cookie accounts and all of that. You're going to have a location to be able to scale.
Yes. I had started interviewing people. Like, I was ready.
You were ready to go.
The legal team was in place. We were trademarking everything. Everything was set to prepare to open a store in June. I just needed to find a place. That was it.
Wow. So now, let me fast forward a little bit. I mean, that was recent, but before I hit record, you were sharing with me how you were saying, I'm not pivoting, I'm shifting. And you had talked about your getting back to your first love of teaching. But you would share that you can't teach. You said, well, I can't teach until March of next year. And I was like, I don't understand why you can't teach now. That doesn't make sense to me. And I want to talk about that.
So, okay. So this is,
because somehow you went from, I'm going to open up this cookie space to COVID to, I want to get back to my first love of teaching, but yet I can't.
Yes. So it's an entire process. A big part of this was I also ended Igniters in March. So there were several things happening all at one time. I already knew it. Well, I had been told I was not supposed to take out a loan to start a business. So that didn't make sense because my loan had just been approved on March 13th, right? So
when you say you were told that, you're talking about from the Lord?
Yes.
Okay. Right. So you had a Holy Spirit instruction not to take a loan for this business. Got it. Okay. So,
everything in front of me was going against what had been prophesied to me.
Right.
And I was like, well, maybe the prophecy was wrong. The prophecy was not wrong because God has a funny sense of humor. Going through the process of getting all those things together is probably something that I can teach another person, but it wasn't necessarily for me. Owning the business and being able to share that experience with people who want to get into this industry, again, something I live, not necessarily for me. I am a teacher at heart, always have been. Like, I was 5 teaching all of my stuffed animals. So I knew I would be teaching on some level. I thought that it would make sense for me to take a job to help increase the income in my house that allowed me to teach children. It was everything I love to do, and I made money. It made sense to me. There were red flags everywhere telling me not to do this. At the time, I did it anyway. I actually was reading Grace Over Grind at the time that I made the decision to go into this particular experience. And I remember putting the book up and I was like, yeah, I can't do this right now because my bank account is telling me that I need to take this job. And even once I finished the book, like a couple of weeks later, I was like, you know what? I don't really know. Then when I got in Igniters, in the first conversation, it was like, you're not where you're supposed to be.
So
and
you have a conversation with the Igniters mentor, and the mentor says to you, who happened to be Alicia, the owner of the Laughing Place Bakery on Team KDE, and she tells you you're not where you're supposed to be. And she didn't even know you.
She didn't even know me. Like, she had no clue. She was just like wherever, and I was sitting in the parking lot of the building, and she was like, you're just not where you're supposed to be. And I was like, yes, I am. I'm sitting outside of my job. And she was like, yeah, you're not supposed to be working there. She said, you have 90 days. That's what she told me. She said, you have 90 days. Did we know a pandemic would happen within those 90 days? No. But I left in 90 days.
Wow.
But because I made that decision to increase my income for a temporary season, it put me into a non-compete. And so I cannot teach until March of 2021.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
So that makes perfect sense.
Yes.
Now, there are a couple things that I caught in that. So you were, so on one hand, but this is the journey, right? This is the journey.
It is.
You said there was red flags all over the place or whatever. So you really weren't feeling peace about it, but the circumstances in front of you were crying out louder than the internal, don't do this. This isn't for you. Yeah. And you couldn't see the reason why.
Mm-mm.
So it was kind of like, I'm going to just go ahead and do this. But here's the thing. God is a redeemer and a restorer and works all things out together, right? And it's going to be awesome when you open up in March. And we're going to get to that in a sec. But it's like, so you walk that out, then you get a prophetic confirmation from your Igniters mentor.
Yeah.
It's like, this is not for you, which was a confirmation because you already knew it wasn't for you.
Yep.
When you started.
Yep.
I knew it wasn't for you.
Yeah.
Yes. But what it did, and it's opened up for you, now you realize, okay, I have a certain number of months to kind of prepare for what God's doing. So now talk to me. I want to talk to you about, there's a couple of things about this whole partnering with God in the midst of transition and shifts. Talk to me. This is a little bit of an Igniters commercial for a second.
Okay.
So talk to me about where you were in terms of doing business in partnership with God. Like, what is it that was going on, or what drew you to, like, I want this Igniters experience. I want this experience of growing and doing business in partnership with God. So like, take me to the before and then take me to a growth, kind of a sign of growth experience and doing it in the midst of what you're transitioning in right now.
Yeah. So it really started with me stepping out on faith, in quotations, right? We hear people step out on faith all the time and start a business, but we never hear that people fully plan for stepping out on faith. Like, faith without work is dead. So you can't just step out on faith if you don't know what you're doing. So as a lifelong learner, I am always going to read something before I just jump. Now, I jump all the time. Like, I will jump, I will leap, but I know how to call out for help when I need it.
Yes.
When I took the job, I was actually in a business deal to buy the business. So I was going to purchase a building last summer. And things just kept happening where nothing lined up. We didn't know, but the woman sold it to an investor. He then hired me to run the store. It sounded wonderful. Somebody else was putting up the money and I get to do what I want to do. It was the most incredible thing. And my mother was like, no, nothing ever comes this great without work. And so that was the first red flag. But we kept going. And because I was still able to run my business, it was booming. I was doing cakes for celebrities. I was on a TV show 2-3 times a month doing cakes and cookies and teaching people how to do things. All of that was great. All of that was wonderful. I went to work. I loved what I was doing, but something didn't sit right with me. And that's not the first time this happened with me at a job. And I kept ignoring it. I knew when I started training 2 days in, something is wrong. And that's when I reached out about igniters. And I was like, okay, I understand that God is trying to tell me something, but my life is so cluttered. I don't know what he's saying.
So it's like, I need to be able to get into this space where I can hear that I can move with him.
And it's not other people.
And it's, yes.
Because that was what was happening at that particular moment. Like there was a climax of things all happening at one time. That wasn't my only job. I had 3 jobs and was running. I was teaching for 3 different companies at the time and running my own business, and still had 2 children that I was homeschooling. So there was a lot happening in my life.
That's why you posted on Facebook that time that you were reading Grace Over Grind and you wanted to throw the book.
Yes.
You said, I wanted to throw this book.
I don't understand. This concept just doesn't make sense to me. I was like, this woman is crazy. This is never going to work. And so, November was like high. December, it was the highest high. I made the most money in November. And it was the first time in 7 years that I also had to do refunds. Because even though I made a whole lot of money, I was so off my game that I messed up so much stuff.
Yeah.
And it was the first time that, I made all this money. And then I looked at it and said, I didn't make anything. I had to refund people their money back because it just wasn't a great product.
Yeah.
And then I felt like my life was spiraling as we went into holiday because the orders kept increasing because I was doing celebrity stuff. So they were posting it everywhere.
Yeah.
Like I did the Real Housewives of Atlanta season finale. I mean, it was just thing after thing. The cakes were in People magazine. It was a lot going on.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, I'm at this super high point in my career, but my life is falling apart.
Yeah.
And I was so miserable. And I was like, okay, I need to fully understand what is grace over grind. So when I got into Igniters, I think the main thing, like that I was told every single month, are you sleeping? Are you resting?
Right. Some basic fundamentals. Yes.
And I was like, no. Because I was always on the internet.
Right. You were team no sleep.
Right. And so one of the first things I had to learn was that grace comes from me giving myself grace, me being able to say no, and understanding that every order isn't a good order. Every order isn't for my company.
Yes.
I knew enough people to send somebody to somebody else.
Yes.
But if I'm just trying to hold on to all of the money and I won't pass it around, how am I going to grow?
Yes.
So in that time of being in Igniters, it was continuous, like looking in a mirror all the time. Like, okay, I literally had to stop before I would take an order and ask myself, if I take this order, what can I not do? Not how much is this going to pay me? It was no longer about money. Everything was, what can I not do? What will I not be able to do? Am I going to sleep? And how is this going to help me later?
So I'm hearing you wanted to make sure there was alignment. So
yes.
And if there's no alignment, I'm not doing it.
I didn't do it. No,
which is a significant shift.
That is huge.
Yeah, that's huge.
It was my mentality was, the more people who come to me, the better off we're going to be. It's going to be wonderful. And my children put things in perspective while we were able to take all the trips in the world because we were traveling.
Yeah.
My daughter was like, Mommy, I miss you. And I was like, what? And she was like, I mean, like we're in all these, cool hotels and we're taking all these trips, but we're always on the go. So what I didn't realize was that as a homeschool mom and as an entrepreneur, my kids went everywhere. Yeah. But that meant they weren't resting.
Right.
And they weren't sleeping. And they weren't getting the things that they needed to get. And I was like, oh, no. We all need to take a nap.
we need a collective rest.
Yes. So it just
That's
wasn't,
good.
you know, I went through that process of changing my mindset.
Yeah.
I don't think it was, some of it I was intentionally doing, and then a lot of it just came with that.
Yeah.
That it was just kind of like, okay, this is life. Oh man, I can sleep for 8 hours.
Right. Imagine that.
It was new.
Let me ask you this.
Yeah.
So now after kind of growing and being able to pause, like you've changed your orientation in terms of, all right, I'm looking for alignment with what God's plan is and what God's dream is for me, as opposed to, you know, being led by the prestige or the money or the things or the whatever. And you've made that shift. Now you're in this season of, I have to wait 6 months to begin to do the thing that I know is my thing. Like, this is on my heart to do. This is me. And I've got these months of preparation, all of those things. How are you partnering with God? Like, how are you allowing yourself to be led and empowered by the Holy Spirit and work with him in the midst of this, this, we'll call it the wait time, but it doesn't mean you can't do anything. But how are you walking this out with God in grace and no grind?
Yeah, there's zero grind. I sleep so much now. It is wonderful. I don't think I've ever been this rested in my life. So a couple of things have happened. Once I received notice that I had to stop doing the thing I know I was put on this earth to do.
Oh, right. Because you started and got a cease and desist.
Yeah. I built the thing. Like, I built it. It was up. It was, people were buying it, and it was like, nope, pull it down. And I had 48 hours to pull it down. Like, there was a deadline. So it was all pulled. Luckily for me, things went wrong when I was putting it together. So I kind of had to rig the system, which means I still have all of the content.
Oh, well, that's good.
So even though at the moment, I was like, technology is failing me, but no, technology saved me. So I don't have to re-record anything because I built it in a different way than I thought I was going to have to. So I still have access to everything. I don't have to re-record. The prayer became okay because I was angry. Like, me and God had to have a talk about this. And I was like, hello, we in the middle of a pandemic. You telling me I can't work? What is this? And it was this situation of, I'm not going to give you vision without providing. And that's when I knew, like, this isn't something I made up. I know I was put on this earth to do this one particular thing. So while I'm in this season, God, I need you to show me what I'm supposed to be doing. And so my circle has changed. Like, my inner circle of people has changed. The people that I am meeting right now are full of strategy. Like, I am meeting strategists after strategists after strategists for very specific pieces of the dream that I know God gave me. It's so crystal clear that I'm like, okay, all right, okay, yes, let me do these things, even down to, without sharing with them why I'm not launching until March. They're just like, so you need 6 months to do X, Y, Z. I'm like,
you're getting confirmation of the need.
Right. They're giving me specific strategy for the next 6 months of my life. And they're like, I know 6 months sounds like a long time, but in March, you're going to be ready to go. And I'm just like,
those are God wink moments.
Only knew. Yeah. And I mean, it's so specific. It's not, some coaches give you very vague things. If you go do this, they're like, no. For this particular thing you're about to do, you need to be here. You need to know this person. You need to do this. You need to do this. And I was like, oh, okay. Yes. So there's a plan. And even in the midst of the plan, there's still, how can I pay this forward? How do I bring other people along in the journey? Because once April of next year hits, like, I'm back on the main stage at conferences again.
Right.
Like, all of my life will blow back up again. But in the meantime, now I have an opportunity to sit and plan things out and to do things the way God wants it to come off. I did it the way that would make me money the fastest the first time. But that doesn't mean it was done in excellence. And it makes me think about like when I was on the praise team at church, how like our director would be like, absolutely not. You're not going to come embarrass me on Sunday. Y'all sound cute, but I know you can sound better than this. Mm-hmm. And so that's what it felt like, where I was being like chastised, like, no, you know better. You know, I've called you into more than this. So now I have the
And it was unsustaining.
Yeah.
You were going to crush under the weight of that thing.
I really was.
Yeah.
Because I was just like, I have to get it out here. I have to get it out here now. Like, and it's like, no, you need to release this in the season it needs to be released.
Yes.
So I don't know what's coming in March of 2021, but evidently in that season is when all of this will need to be released. So
I love how the thing that seemed like, you know, the whole cease and desist, you know, that whole thing. On one hand, you could look at that and be like, oh, the enemy, you know, just took by, you know, whatever. But very quickly, you're able to kind of realign yourself and say, you know what? This is the situation at hand. Mm-hmm. God, what is it that's on your heart? Like, let's align our hearts and dreams and thoughts concerning this thing. And now you have the gift of development time. It was forced. But it's a gift.
It was. And even the week after I got it, I was looking at a Facebook Live for my church. And our pastor was prophesying to another chef at the church who happens, I think he runs sound. And because there's nobody in there but like, you know, them and the sound team.
Right.
And so I was like, interesting. And the prophecy he gave him was everything I had just shut down. And so I was sitting there and I said, wait a minute. So I found him on Facebook and I said, you don't know me. However, you just got a prophecy on this Facebook Live that you needed to launch some courses. You needed to get it up within 30 days. You needed to make sure it did this, this, and this. And I said, here is how you do that.
That's so
And
good.
I literally gave him everything that I had just taken down.
Yes.
And he said, oh my God. And I waited 3 days before I did it. Because I was like, there's no way you let me build this to pull it down and give it to somebody else. So it took me 3 days to wrestle with it. I sent it to him on a Wednesday and he said, I literally just got up off my face because I was like, God, how? I don't know how to do this. I know how to teach people, but I don't know how to put this online. And I gave him literally everything that I had.
Every step.
And he was like, what? Who are you? And I was like, listen, just go with it. And as my children watched that, like we were all in here crying because they were like, Mommy, like you just hear about this kind of stuff or people go through things like it was for somebody else. But we just watched it. Like we witnessed this happen and you just gave all of this to somebody else. And I said, well, maybe that's why I was supposed to do it in this season.
And the thing is, it's just another aspect of just the goodness of God where there's nothing ever wasted in the kingdom of God. And it's like you can do a thing and then it doesn't work out the way you thought it was going to work out, but yet God still redeems it, restores it. So even if that wasn't the reason, maybe it was, maybe it wasn't the reason why you did it for it to come down. But regardless, it doesn't even matter. The fact of the matter is that ended up being a blessing to somebody else.
Yeah. And in turn, I have now met all these other people.
Yes.
With strategy.
Yes.
On how, and the fact that their strategy is 6 months out. Really? It's just like, okay, all right, guys. So there is a plan.
Yes.
I'm just going to trust you and your plan.
Yeah.
And do whatever the steps are to get to that point. And there's a constant check of making sure that whatever it is that we're doing, even in the books that are coming out, I want to make sure that the message of whatever is supposed to get across in this book or in this ebook or on this blog post or in this Facebook Live, that whatever it is you want me to say, that I'm saying it.
Yeah.
And so that has been incredible because even the cease and desist chapter in the book is not really about the whole process of the cease and desist, but everything before it that led me to that company.
Yes.
And how, we'll jump the gun because the money looks good. But at the end of the day, if that's not what God calls you into, it's not going to be sustainable. So that's even the cease and desist is why are you questioning what God told you to do in the first place?
It's good.
You're going to end up in that situation.
Yes.
So
yes.
yeah, I mean, so it's been a learning process. It's been a growing process. I keep putting on Instagram that I'm being pruned in this season, but at the same time, I'm still growing.
That's right.
So that has been an incredible blessing.
I love it. That is so good. I appreciate you sharing so transparently the journey along the way. I'm excited about what is to come and, you know, what you're up to over these next several months. It's going to be a beautiful convergence of just like these experiences that you've had over the years, the highs, the lows, all the in-betweens, and then being able to get back to the core of your core gift and love of teaching. And so I love it. I love it. So good. Where do people go to connect, sign up with what you're up to? Where do they go?
So you can go to thebakingmama.com. And that does link out to the cookie shop. It links out to all the things, books, ebooks, blog posts on entrepreneurship, on juggling a family while being an entrepreneur. So there's lots of things there, lots of baking tips, especially for holiday coming up. So there's even a couple of freebies coming out. Some free cooking books will be coming out throughout holiday and the beginning of the year as people try and get back on track with their eating habits. So all of that great content is ready to roll.
I love it. Good stuff. Thanks for joining today.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks for joining us on the Kingdom Driven Entrepreneur Podcast. If you've enjoyed what you've heard today, we encourage you to subscribe and spread the word. And don't forget, you can gain access to even more resources, plus a thriving community of fire starters by visiting our website at kingdomdrivenentrepreneur.com.